In fact, it's interesting, since I got here I asked most people what's been the highlight of the conference. And I realised it was at a different sort of conference to the ones I normally speak at. Like, I spend my life at boring corporate conferences. And I turned up here and said, what was the highlight? And every one of you said, cutting up a pig yesterday, or doing the demonstration. I'm like, this is a fun place to be. So it's great to be here tonight as your dinner speaker. We've only got a short session together this evening, so I'm going to dive straight in. We're going to talk about this whole theme of the generation gap in the minutes we've got together. But before we start, can I see a show of hands? How many of you here have ever endured a boring or irrelevant presentation at a conference before? Hands if you've experienced that. All of you, look at that. Okay. Second question, be honest. Hands up if you were the one delivering that boring or irrelevant presentation. A few hands. All right. My commitment to you is what we're going to go through tonight will be neither of those two things, boring or irrelevant. I want to make sure what we cover in this session, the first instance is going to be really practical. I want to give you stuff you can take away and use as soon as we're done. And so much of what you've heard has been practical at the conference. This will be the same. I know that we've got a mixture. I mean, 80% of you are educators. We've also got industry in the room. I want to touch on both groups in our time together. So it's going to be practical. I want to make sure it's a very honest conversation tonight. Let's speak directly to issues, not just dance around them. In fact, I might be politically incorrect at a few points. Do I have your permission to do that? Because let's be candid. Let's speak to some of the stuff you are facing, particularly if you're an educator every single day. And what I want to make sure we have some fun as we go along as well, because I reckon fun is underrated at most conferences and gatherings. So just to kick us off, thinking about this whole theme of the generation gap, I want to start with a word association exercise this evening. In a few moments, here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn to the person next to you and share with them the first word that comes to mind when you hear the term, the label, the phrase, Generation Y. When you hear that label, what's the first word that comes to mind? So share that with the person next to you. 10 seconds, go for it. Okay, who's brave enough to share what was the word that just came up in their conversations? Hands up, what did you say?
Bum crack.
The bum crack photo. It's sort of perfect. So you thought of that before you even saw the image, which is just beautiful. You know, I think we'd be organised, really, wouldn't you? Okay, so bum cracks, what have you got? Entitled. So you're like, snap, that was mine. Okay, entitled, interesting. What was yours? Younger. By definition, is there a little bit of like pain in that? Like, yes, it's interesting. So they're a younger, somewhat entitled group. What did you say?
Mine's hyphenated.
Yeah.
Low risk.
No risk.
Low
Low risk. Okay, interesting. So that.
In that classroom context.
Yes, absolutely. So not willing to take risks, academic risks in many cases. Yeah. What was yours? Lazy. Gosh, so we've got like a low-risk, entitled group of bum-crack people. Were there any positives at all? What were yours here? That wasn't positive. What was yours? They're techno. Yeah, but that's sort of a very neutral one, isn't it? They're just good at technology stuff. Okay, but it's true. Yeah. What was yours over here? Yeah, of course. That phone addiction. You know, it's interesting. I mean, we went around the room and got a sense of where your conversations just went. I reckon there'd be some pretty common themes that would come up. And I came across an observation a little while ago that I think in many ways typifies how a lot of people feel about this younger generation. And this was the observation here. The youth of today love luxury. You know, this sense that they've been pampered, spoiled, they've got bad manners, contempt for authority. They no longer rise when their elders enter the room, they contradict their parents, they tyrannise their teachers. And some of you know, of course, the interesting thing here is this is not a new observation. This was attributed to Socrates by Plato in 410 BC. Okay? We have been slagging off young people for millennia, because those of you who are baby boomers, the same sort of stuff was said about you when you were teenagers. Oh, definitely not. The boomers never did any wrong. It's interesting though, this whole intergenerational thing we hear so much about. We often talk about generational differences in terms of behaviours and attitudes, but often the generation gap is expressed in some far more practical ways. I came across this on Facebook a little while back, I loved it. The younger generation will never know the connection between these two things on the screen. And what I loved is I was at an event recently and this 24-year-old said, yes, I don't get it, what is the connection between those two things? And if you don't know, we'll talk after the session tonight. But when this is the rate of change we've seen, and it's expressed in the generation gap, just how much things have changed in a very, very short space of time. And just to give you a bit of context or backstory, My interest in the whole theme of studying generational change started back in 2004. Because 2004 was the year that we saw headlines like these ones flash across newspapers around the Western world. Remember Corey Worthington and all his mates, that party they had? And there was so much negative press about Gen Y. We were told they were, a lot of the words we heard before, self-centered, materialistic, entitled, impatient, lazy, all the rest of it. And being a Gen Y myself, I'm sort of just on the border between Gen X and Gen Y. I remember thinking, is this true? Now, are we really as bad as everyone's saying, or is this a whole lot of media hype? And so I spent the next 3.5 years travelling around Australia and then beyond, interviewing 80,000 high school and TAFE students to get a sense of what's actually making youth culture tick. What are the values, the attitudes, the beliefs of this young group, beyond all the hype that we hear? And at the end of that process, a number of years back now, I wrote a book called The New Rules of Engagement. And essentially my goal with this book was to capture on paper those trends. What's happening with young people, particularly the stuff that you see that might be confusing or frustrating or even offensive at times. What's driving some of that behaviour? But more importantly, how do you bridge the gap? Regardless of whether you're trying to bridge the gap in the classroom or at home or in the workplace. And tonight in the minutes we've got together, I want to pick up on some of the themes of this book. And I'm guessing that you've all heard labels like Gen Y and Baby Boom and the rest of it. But I have this suspicion there's probably a number of you who are still a bit unclear as to where the lines between these groups fall. But more importantly, have you ever wondered who decided that we just draw a line there and that's a whole new generation? So let's actually clear some of that up before we go any further, because if we look at the last 100 and a bit years from a generational perspective, these are the groups who've got to understand. Okay, the first generation of last century is a group called the Builders, sometimes called the Silent Generation or the Veterans. They're the group born in the early 1900s through the mid-1940s. Now, interestingly, this is actually two separate generations that we grouped together for ease of analysis, and if we had time, we could go into why that's the case. But I should just check, are there any Builder generation people in the room this evening? I won't single anyone out, but if there are, okay, we have one. All right, perfect. Fly the flag. All right, so Builders. After the Builders, of course, came the infamous Baby Boomers. They're very proud of themselves, look at that. I don't even ask for your hands when you put it up. Typical Baby Boomers. All right. Baby Boomers born in the mid-40s through to the mid-1960s. Who are all you Baby Boomers? Come on, let's see your hands. There's lots of you. And they make a lot of noise. Have you noticed that? Now, interestingly, here's the thing about Baby Boomers. Because they're a generation that is so demographically large, they are used to essentially getting their way. Follow me here, because I want to tell you this. Big business and policymakers are terrified of upsetting Baby Boomers, because they know if they upset you, particularly from a government perspective, you'll boot them out of power. And so there's a lot of attention toward Baby Boomers. I love you and so it should be. I love that sort of attitude. That very attitude is what irritates the next generation. The group called Generation X, who are demographically smaller, equally loud. Now, interestingly, here's the thing about Gen X. While they're often bitter and twisted because they feel like they've been overlooked, because have you noticed that no one much seems to talk about Generation X? Like, no one seems to care. So you Gen Xers, what we're going to do is we're going to rebadge tonight, Hug a Generation X night, okay? Because you poor sods get no attention. Now, we're not going to talk about you Gen Xers a whole lot tonight, but you're used to that, so that's okay. But we'll talk a little bit about the influence of Gen X as parents. Because Gen X parents are dramatically different to Baby Boomer parents, and they are the parents of many of the students you're teaching right now. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Of course, Gen Y come next, born in the early 80s through the late 90s. Who are the Gen Ys, the millennials here? Hands up. It's a few of us. I love the degree of pride with which one not putting your hand up. It's like, yeah, whatever. I'm in this group, but not proud. Now, interestingly, you'll notice there's two labels on the screen here. Gen Y and millennials are essentially the same group. Those are interchangeable terms. Gen Y, what the British, Australians, South Africans, and most of the rest of the world called this group. The Americans labelled them millennials, and that was a label that stuck in the late 1990s. The idea being they'll be the first generation to graduate from college in the new millennia. That's where the name came from. In the last few years, because the Americans called them millennials, the rest of the world gave up and said, okay, we'll call them that too. Okay, so you've sort of got these two names floating around which basically mean the same thing. After them come Generation Z, born in the late 90s through to the early 2010s. Anyone got Gen Zs at home? Hands up if you've got Gen Z kids. Many of you, the Gen Xers often do. And then Generation Alpha come next. Now I've got one of those and a 2-year-old at home, and they're interesting because technology is like oxygen to them. It's fascinating to watch them grow up as a generation. And you may wonder why we went to Alpha. We basically ran out of letters, is the answer to that question. It showed a remarkable lack of foresight to start at X. We really should have started further up the alphabet. Now, tonight, in the minutes we've got together, these are the 2 groups we're going to focus on. Because they are the majority of your students, but from an industry perspective, they are increasingly your employees as well. And I want to put it to you tonight that there are probably 7 statements or sentences that characterise this next generation, these 2 groups bunched together. And I wonder, of these 7, which is the one that probably stands out to you most as the thing that you'll say, that absolutely typifies my experience of the next generation? Because I want to debunk some myths, but also talk to some of the things that are causing angst and frustration and disengagement right now. So if you've got something to write some notes with, I know it's dinner, but there might be some stuff you want to take away and really reflect on from a professional perspective. Maybe grab out a phone or a tablet device or whatever. Because we're going to move very quickly here, and I want to go through 7 statements, 7 sentences that typify the next generation. And the first sentence is this one here. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's a winner. Now here's what's interesting. One of the most common frustrations I hear from my corporate clients is they'll talk of the younger generation, say, what is it with this young group? And they need to be thanked or congratulated for pretty much everything they do. They arrive at work in the morning and there's almost an expectation. The boss will say, oh my goodness, thank you for being here today. We're so grateful you arrived. And the employer's like, what the heck? I pay you to be here. Why do I have to thank you as well? And the reality is, you do. There was a study done 2 years ago asking Gen Ys how often they wanted praise from their boss. Are you ready for this? If you're an employer, 60% said once a day would be great, if that's all right. 35% of them said 2 to 3 times a day would be even better, if that's cool. And the question, of course, is, why does this group often seem so high maintenance? To understand that, we've got to go back in time. A very pivotal year from a parenting perspective was 1979. Some of you may remember why that was a key year. It was the International Year of the Child. And that sparked a shift in the way we raised kids right around the Western world. See, up until that point, there was a sense in which kids are better to be seen and not heard. But from that point forward, the whole focus became on the next generation having a rock-solid self-esteem. And we entered an era we often call, in retrospect, the era of self-esteem. Now, here was the challenge with this. The whole era of self-esteem was based on a flawed premise. That premise is, you can give self-esteem to someone else. Here's a problem. You can't do that. You can give encouragement, you can foster confidence, but true, abiding self-esteem is always an internally driven thing. And yet what we did is our desire to raise a generation with a strong self-esteem caused us as society, and particularly in education, to feel like we needed to start praising this group for anything and everything. You are special, you're magnificent, you're unique, you're wonderful. You can do anything you want to do, be anything you want to be. And here's the challenge with this. The old saying is true, we crave what we feed on. And so for a generation raised on a steady diet of extrinsic praise and feedback, they now need it. In fact, have you ever wondered why this young group share everything on social media? Like everything, the stuff they share. When you were their age, you wrote in a diary that had a lock on it and you hid it from your sister, okay? It was like private stuff. They broadcast this stuff. And if you've ever wondered why the need to do that, because I'm always interested, I just observe behaviour. What's behind the behaviour? What's the need that behaviour serving? So if you look at this oversharing from this young group, why do they do this? It's so much about the desire to get extrinsic feedback and praise. I mean, you can't just experience something like watch a beautiful sunset. You've got to take a photo. You can upload it to Instagram or Facebook, because the goal is to put a clever hashtag with it or add as many awesome filters that means you get as many likes as possible. Because there's almost a sense that if you don't get the feedback, if you don't get the likes, the experience hasn't got value. Now here's the challenge when it comes to this group as an employment basis. We said they need a whole lot more praise, a whole lot more validation than previous groups, but if you notice, they also don't do well with the opposite of praise. Have you noticed this? You give a bit of constructive criticism and they crumble. And the challenge is, you are dealing with a generation increasingly who have never received negative feedback. When you think about the whole culture in schools, the whole everyone's a winner. Every runner in the race gets a ribbon. I call this communism on the sports field, because that's basically what it is. Right? Who are the Victorians here? Any Victorians in the room? In Victoria now, of course, up until the age of 12 or 13, they do not score AFL matches. Because the fear is, what if we damage the self-esteem of the team that doesn't win? Now here's the problem with this. In our desire to protect them from negative feedback, to make sure everyone's a winner, what we're seeing with this group is they're actually finding a way around this. They still know who won and who didn't. The only ones who are trying to play the game are the parents. Okay? The interesting thing is the impact this is having on their self-confidence. Great irony is this, our desire to build a generation full of self-esteem and resilience has resulted in the very opposite thing. I remember working with one teacher in a school who said in her school, get this, they can no longer even use the word fail with a student. She said in her school, when a student hasn't made the grade their term, they now use the term deferred success because it's seen as better for self-esteem. And so you can see this whole approach to crafting a world where everything's couched in the positive is actually not doing them any favours. And we'll come back and talk about that if we have time at the end. So that's the first sentence. Everyone's a winner. Okay, number two. Second sentence that typifies this next generation coming through is the sentence that truth is subjective. Now this stands in stark contrast to the worldview many of you were raised with when you were students yourself. So years ago, the dominant paradigm in society and in education is a paradigm we called a modernist worldview. A modernist worldview went like this. In life, there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. There are things that are black, there are things that are white. This modernist worldview said if there are absolutes, those absolutes ought to guide your behaviour. They should guide your sense of morality and ethics. Now, can I suggest there is one word that will be the dead giveaway you still have, a truth is absolute mindset. My challenge to you is become very aware, hyper-vigilant as to how often this one word comes out of your mouth every single day, particularly in the classroom. Because I guarantee if you're going to be effective in engaging a younger generation, your success will rise or fall based on how often you use this one word. Okay, the modernist truth is absolute word is the word should. Be mindful of how often you use that word. Because what should does, you should take something that's neutral and it places a judgment on top of it. And from a modernist perspective, if truth is absolute, if there's right and wrong, well, you should respond accordingly. You should think a certain way. You should believe certain things. You should behave in a certain way in certain social settings. And here's the challenge. You say the word should to generation Y or younger, and what is the first question they ask in automatic knee-jerk response? Why? Now, they don't ask why just to challenge your authority or to be a bloody nuisance, although it often is, isn't it? This constant questioning of why. The reason they ask why is because you've got a generation raised being taught truth is subjective. It's what we call a postmodern mindset. And so there's no such thing for this group as black or white. Truth is shades of grey. Truth is based on my personal experience, my interpretation of the world around me. It was interesting this morning, I don't know if you've seen the Golden Globe speech that Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey gave last night. And the phrase that stood out to me in that speech, who has seen it by the way? If you haven't, it's quite extraordinary as a piece of communication. One thing that Oprah said that's been one of the catch cries for her over many years, and I think it really typifies the shift to what a truth is subjective way of seeing the world, was she said, speak your truth. Now that's interesting, that's something Oprah said for years. What's interesting about that phrase, just step back from the language for a moment, truth is not something that is objective or external. Truth is, it is subjective, it's based in me. My version of truth, your version of truth, they can actually be mutually exclusive, but somehow my truth doesn't need to impinge on you. We don't have to discuss it, we don't have to let our truth rub against each other. We can both have a version of truth that is diametrically opposed, and that's okay. Now, just to step out of the discussion point here, this is incredibly problematic. This hyper-individualistic view of the world is problematic, but it has benefits. It's made a society that is far more open and tolerant and hopefully more kind. But this does bring challenges from an education perspective. Those of you who are educators, how do you teach truth? Expectations. How do you set particularly ideas around behaviour for a generation for whom there's no such thing as an external view of what's right and wrong? And we'll talk about that briefly at the end, because it is so critical you get good at communicating with a postmodern learner, and it's not easy. Okay, number 3. Third statement that really typifies this next generation is that out of range is out of the question. Now, how many of you have walked into a cafe or restaurant and seen a scene like this and privately judged the people who are all glued to their phones? Who judges people who do this? Many of you do. I find the same thing, and then I find myself catching myself doing the same thing. Like today I was at the carousel, the baggage carousel at the airport, and I honestly, of the 15 people standing waiting for baggage in the area I was standing, everyone was on their phones, and I had that secret self-righteous, they can't even just focus for a minute, just in the moment. And I found myself like a minute later, I got a text message and I was on Facebook and I was checking the news and I'm like, I've done the same thing. It's just so addictive. Now to give you a sense of how addictive this technology is, constantly being switched on, plugged in, I love this piece of research from Pew Research from a couple of years back. 40% of millennials said they would rather lose a finger than their mobile phone. Nomophobia is apparently the name of the condition of losing your phone and spiralling into despair, this idea of being out of range. Now, case in point, I came across this a few years back now, I love this. This was an advertisement for Lord Howe Island. I pulled it out of one of the Qantas magazines. As I read this advertisement, I want you to think, which generation was this not written for? Okay, here's what the ad said. Does your daily life feel constantly bombarded by messages from electronic mediums? If so, there's a place you can escape to where your mobile phone may not work. It said, come and discover the digital detox of Lord Howe Island. Now, can you imagine any Gen Z reading that and going, oh, that'd be great. I mean, are you serious? That's a recurring nightmare for Gen Z, right? The idea of being on holidays and not being able to take photos and share them with your friends, whipping out your selfie stick, make everyone jealous at the photos you've taken. And yet my mum, baby boomer, she would love this. This is her ideal holiday destination. Like, I want to go on holidays where no one can bother me. I don't want emails, I don't want phone calls, I don't even really want Facebook. Who's like my mum? I don't want to be arranged in reach all of the time. Okay, many of you. And you contrast that with younger generations, then it's a different story entirely. In fact, I love watching this young group go on school camp, particularly primary school age kids or early high school. And you watch them go on school camp, particularly if you're in Tassie here, so many of the campsites have no mobile phone reception. And you watch them get off the bus and they look at their phones and there's like this horrified expression, like there's no signal bars on the top left-hand corner of their phone screen. And like you watch them, they start wandering around looking for reception. They climb trees and hold their phones up, right? Because the fear is to be off the grid. Not connected. Like this idea of what's going on I'm not aware of. I'm out of the loop. Now it's interesting, in fact, I came across this emergency exit sign, which I thought was pretty typical in many ways recently. In case of fire, exit the body before chasing the fire. What I loved about this is that it's so true. Now, I look at all my friends, now I must say it's beautiful irony when you get your phones out to take a photo of it. Brilliant in itself. Now, what's interesting about this is I look at all my peers now, Gen Ys who've got kids, and I look at how many of them will put photos on Instagram or Facebook of their kids having just fallen off the bike and grazed their knee or whatever it is. And you'll scroll through and think, okay, wait a minute, you've got a photo of a kid up against the wall, pinned under their bike with a bloody knee. And just to step back from the image for a moment, you've got to think, what happened just here? You discovered your child pinned under their bike and your first instinct was not to help, but to take a photo for Instagram. I mean, that gives some indication of just how much this group are living their life through the lens of their smartphone with a view to social media. The idea is of having something, the experience that isn't on social media, that whole notion of did it really happen. Now, if you look at the impact of this on learning and physiology, it is profound. For instance, you think of the number of students right now who, because of this connection and addiction to phones, aren't finishing essays in school exam situations. Not because they don't know the stuff, but because their hands are getting too sore. Have you noticed this in the exam room? Now, every generation's done this, but they're doing it more. Because you think about it, all the way through high school, every assessment task, every essay is typed. And then we plonk them in a room and say, we'd like you to handwrite for 2.5 hours if you wouldn't mind. And they literally haven't got the strength in their hands to do it. You think about the impact of this on mental health. For instance, University of Michigan 5.5 years ago did a study that looked at empathy in teenagers. What they discovered is that 18-year-olds today display 40% less empathy than 18-year-olds 20 years ago. When they looked at why that was, what became abundantly clear was this. You've got a generation whose formative communication is being done through a digital filter. Social media, text messages, maybe picking up the phone, but even then, often not. Have you noticed if you try and call your kids, they never answer? Or you text and they'll get straight back to you, okay? There's even a fear of the phone. Like communication is done through that digital filter because there is safety there. Here's the challenge though. How do we learn empathy? We learn empathy by observing some of the nuances of communication, like listening to the tone of voice, facial expressions, body language. You've got a generation who aren't getting many of those subtle cues at a young age because so much of their formative communicating is being done on that digital platform. So this addiction to being switched on is a really interesting one to watch and interesting to play it forward, because if you look at Generation Alphas right now, 2/3 of babies under the age of 1 are spending in excess of 80 minutes of screen time, 80 minutes of their day in front of a screen every day right now. A baby born today by the age of 7 will spend a full year of their life in front of a screen. And so you get a sense of sort of the impact of this. Okay, what are we up to? 4. The fourth sentence that typifies this group: respect must be earned. And this is interesting, of course, because for many of you, when you were at school, the notion was, well, respect is bestowed. What were you all taught growing up? Respect your elders. You give respect based on someone's age, or their title, their years of experience, their academic credentials. And you hear it as much as I do, young people today are disrespectful. Now, courtesy and respect are two different things. I think what we often see is a lack of courtesy in this group. There's very little doubt about that. But respect is a different thing, subtly but significantly different. And can I suggest, far from being something that doesn't matter to this group, respect is a core value. But the path there is different. It can't be bestowed, it can't be demanded, respect has got to be earned. Now let's be really honest, in a high school setting, this mentality is an affront to a whole lot of high school educators. You'll speak to teachers, and I've had the conversations over the years where the teacher will say, how dare they expect me to earn their respect? I've been teaching for longer than they've been breathing. And there's a direct correlation, by the way, between teachers who have that mentality. I'm the teacher, therefore I just deserve respect. A correlation between that mentality and the teachers who hate the kids, who can't wait to retire. They've got a 3.5-year countdown to retirement, and all the students are counting down too, because every day becomes a battle. Can you picture these teachers? You know the ones we're talking about. You can probably have a list of names in your school for a high school setting. Because here's the thing, these teachers go into the classroom every day with an unconscious agenda. That agenda is, I'm going to get their respect today. And often the way they think they'll do that is, I'm going to make them hate me so much they've got no option but to respect me. I'm going to yell louder, give more detentions, remove more privileges. And do they get more respect from the students or less? It's less. We'll talk in a few moments about how do you break that cycle and build respect for this group, because if you earn their respect, honestly the battle is half won. Right, number 5. Fifth one I threw in because of the industry people in the room. This is an interesting one. There's more to life than work. We often hear it said, and I bet you've said it yourself or heard it said, that younger generations seem to not have the work ethic that older generations did. But even the taxi driver on the way here, I mean, it's amazing the stuff you learn from taxi drivers, isn't it? Because I was driving through town and I said, I've been to Lonnie for a couple of years, probably 18 months to 2 years. I said, what's it like? How's the economy going? What are some of the new things being developed? And he said, oh, the economy's much better. I said, well, what's unemployment like? Because that was pretty dicey last time I was here. And he said, oh, unemployment's okay. He said, it's just the young people. Just the young people, because they don't want to work. And it's interesting how so quickly we reach for these generalisations that young people don't have any work ethic. Now, what's interesting is there are some lazy young people. But there are also some lazy Gen Xers, some lazy baby boomers. Laziness is not a generational characteristic. What you see that we often label as a lack of work ethic in Gen Y is the fact that this is a generation who've got very different priorities. Now for baby boomers, and there are plenty of you in the room tonight, for baby boomers, work ethic was intrinsically linked to identity. Intrinsically linked, this notion of, I prove how valuable I am by how hard I work. And so baby boomers, you were the ones that would come to work early, you'd stay back late, you'd take work home on the weekend. You know, I'd have a boss who's the baby boomer who'd send an email to all the staff, all the team at 11:59 p.m. and then another one to all the team at 5:30 in the morning, just so that everyone was aware of how hard they were working, the hours they were keeping. Now, you might have had two baby boomers in the staff room at lunch, and one said to the other, well, you know, I worked 85 hours last week and had a minor stroke. What about you? You know, there's almost this one-upmanship of whose life was more out of balance. Because if I'm the most out of balance person I know, I'm the most valuable team player. Now here's the interesting thing, Generation Y have grown up seeing the heart attacks, the strokes, the broken marriages in their parents' generation, often due to a lack of work-life balance. And they're starting their careers saying, hey, we want to get ahead. I mean, they're ambitious, they want to run the show. Have you noticed that? But not at any cost. They'll say, you know what, I want to value other stuff, not just work. It's interesting, you often have situations where, you know, the boss says to the team, okay, we're going to stay back on Tuesday afternoon, it's all hands on deck, we've got a deadline to meet, we'll buy your pizzas, you know, but you got to stay back. You got one Gen Y who says, oh, I can't, I've got Pilates on Tuesdays, I couldn't miss it. And the boss is like, are you serious? Like, when I was 3 years into my career, I would never have said that to my boss. And in many ways, we should congratulate them for having this sort of approach. Because hey, it's exactly what we've told them to do. We've told Gen Y, have balance, value your health, value your friends, value family. And when we do that, when they do those things, we complain they've got no work ethic. What we see is often a different set of priorities with this group based on what they've seen and what they've been taught. Right, number 6 is a very interesting one. I want to park here briefly because I think it's important we get our heads around this one. The 6th statement that really typifies the next generation is that life was never meant to be hard. Now, of course, that philosophy stands in direct contrast with the philosophy that many of you were taught by, of course, Malcolm Fraser, who taught us that life was never meant to be easy. And of course, we were taught that if life was never meant to be easy, then by deduction, guess what? Life's just meant to be a little bit hard. So therefore, when life gets hard, baby boomers, Gen Xers, you see those hardships as an opportunity to grow. I mean, it's not fun, but deal with it. Suck it up. Get over it. That's just life. You know, rise to the challenge. It's exactly the mentality. And what you often see happen is when younger generations encounter hardships, the challenge is from the youngest age they've been taught by advertisers and pop culture that actually life is meant to be easy. That's the base philosophy they've been given. So when life gets hard, and it can be anything, like a relationship that's been rock solid for 3.5 weeks breaks up. It can be something simple or trivial. It can be more serious, like you don't get the job or you lose the job. Or perhaps someone in the family gets unwell or even passes away. But whatever it is, when life gets hard, what you tend to see is younger generations draw one of 2 conclusions. And I bet you've seen both. First conclusion goes like this. If life is meant to be easy, that's what I've been told, and right now my life isn't, if it's a bit hard, first conclusion, well, there must be something wrong with the goal I've set. I must be on the wrong path. Because if it was the right path, it'd just be easier than this. So the formula Gen Y and younger have been taught by pop culture is easy equals right, hard equals wrong. Now if you follow that to its logical extent, that's a pretty worrying way of viewing the world. That's the sort of philosophy they've been given. And so you can see this in the academic world. I remember working with a group of TAFE colleges about 3 or 4 years ago, and they were telling me across the college, the non-completion rate amongst Gen Ys for Cert 2 and Cert 3 courses was 68%. Because what they were noticing, and contrasting with baby boomers and Gen Xers in the same class, they said the Gen Ys would get 3 weeks in, and the course would get hard. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is hard. I've obviously made the wrong choice, this is the wrong course. Because if it was the right course, it'd just be easier than this. Well, you see this in the workplace, where Gen Ys will get a job, and they're like 3 days or 3 minutes into the new job, they're like, oh my gosh, this is like seriously hard. Like, obviously, this is not the right career path for me. And so this whole issue of resilience is something that doesn't come naturally because of the philosophy this group have been given. So the first conclusion goes like this. If life is meant to be easy and my life isn't right now, there must be something wrong with the goal. I'm on the wrong path. Second conclusion they draw, in many ways is more concerning. I want to challenge you if you're a parent or a grandparent, look out for this one in teenagers. Because it's a conclusion that goes like this. If life is meant to be easy and right now my life isn't, well, there must be something wrong with me. And this is the breeding ground for so many of the mental health issues we keep hearing about, because you've honestly got a generation who believe that if life isn't awesome all the time, somehow they're not made of the right stuff. And of course, what tends to build this worldview? Go back to social media again. Because they jump on Instagram, they jump on Facebook and scroll through, and everyone else's life looks so glamorous and exciting and easy. And they measure, I heard someone put it recently very well, he said, you've got a generation who are comparing their behind-the-scenes reel with everyone else's highlight reel. And wondering why they're coming up not feeling like they're not quite making the grade. In fact, without any hint of irony, I found this on Facebook a little while ago. May your life be as awesome as you pretend it is on Facebook. Because that's the challenge. You've got a generation who are taking their cues from often a very fabricated view of reality. Now, the seventh sentence we're going to come back to right at the end. That's going to stress some of you out because you like symmetry and all the things that are meant to go in spots. We will come back to the seventh one at the end. But before we look at some strategy stuff, just to pause for a moment, 3 questions I want you to reflect on in groups of 2 or 3. From what we covered just there, what's one thing you found perhaps a bit surprising? Something that you wouldn't have expected coming into the session for tonight? Number 2, what did you find a bit concerning? What was a bit of a worry? And number 3, what did you find confirming? Something that as we talked about it, you went, my gosh, it's exactly what I've seen. Now I realise it's not just my own experience, it's actually part of a broader trend. So those 3 questions, 2 or 3 minutes, in groups of 2 or 3, go for it. Okay. Very briefly, who's wanting to share? What do they find surprising from what we just discussed? Any surprises? Just over here, yeah. So you talked about the idea of giving consequences draining respect. That's interesting. If we have time to unpack that, because it's how you give the consequences, how you set boundaries that makes a difference. A colleague of mine, an adolescent psychologist, put it very well. He said, rules with a relationship equals respect. So he said, rules without relationship equals resentment, rebellion, and revenge. And it's so true. And you see, anyone who tries to put rules in place without the relationship, but interesting, if you just have the relationship and you don't put the boundaries in place, they actually don't respect you. The teachers who are a pushover, whose pursuit is popularity, you notice those teachers, they just want to be the cool teacher. It sets up a very dangerous power dynamic in the classroom. So it's how you set the boundaries and the rules that matter. You're spot on. Yeah, thank you. What else was a surprise? Any other surprises from what we discussed there? Out of the back, yeah.
Children under the age of 12 months are spending so long.
Yeah, the screen time thing was a surprise, yeah. Well, let's bring what I've into the second one. What did you find concerning? Any concerns, specific concerns from what we talked about just then? Any specific concerns? Who's brave enough? Just here.
I'm old enough to remember the Vietnam War, and the whole cohort of people in the Western world learned not to respect their elders because of their position as a result of that war. That reflects the fact that you're too young to remember.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't agree with the comment.
Right.
Respect has to be earned. I think that's respect.
Yeah. It's got the comment about the Vietnam War. And it's interesting too, even in the First and Second World Wars, our Aussie culture was so geared toward that idea of respect being something that had to be earned, which was interesting because we were often far better in the field of combat for that very reason, because we didn't just blindly follow authority. Us Aussies challenged it. We questioned things. And there was still a sense of decorum and deference that it's taken decades to lose, but we're down at a point where in many cases it's been lost. And interesting things where you see this most clearly expressed is in Asia. So in Asia, you've still got a national culture that's very much geared toward respecting your parents and authorities and the teacher and the rest of it. I remember doing some work in Korea a few years ago with the government Department for Youth Affairs. And their biggest challenge was, they say, we're dealing with young people who on the outside appear to be respectful and deferent, but when you scratch beneath the surface, they are taking their cues culturally from their peers in the West. And so they're seeing breakdowns in the family unit and the social order because that change has happened in the space of one generation, not 2 or 3, as we've seen in Australia and much of the Western world. It's a really interesting point. Yeah, cool. Any other concerns? Any other concerns? Just here,
The incredible mental health issues in a lot of the secondary students, based on that fact that if it's not easy, it's either their fault or they're not in the right place.
Yeah, so the concern about mental health and how they will draw conclusions that are unhelpful. And the other thing we're noticing, I don't know if you see this in your context, but it's interesting working with educators who've been in education for decades, who've just got that sense of wisdom and experience. What I'm hearing from the field more and more is that we are running into the trap of over-diagnosing. We're very quick to label. And the problem with labels, of course, is the moment that something is labelled, that label becomes the lens through which you look at yourself from that point onwards. I remember speaking to a school principal in not Geelong, Ballarat, about 3 years ago, and she said she shared an experience that happened the previous week where there was a student in year 1 who was nervous about having to do a presentation to the class, and the mum brought the student up to the principal to say, look, I want you to give my daughter permission not to do the presentation to the class because she's having anxiety attacks. And so the principal sent the mother out of the room and just had a chat to the daughter and what was going on. And basically, because there are kids that have proper anxiety attacks at that age, she wanted to be clear on what's going on. But this girl was just really nervous. And this principal was able to sit down and say, you know what, this is a natural reaction. This is okay, this is normal. And she said in that moment she realised how important that conversation was, because the moment that kid goes, okay, I'm someone who has anxiety attacks, you can imagine from that point onwards, that becomes the lens through which she views herself from that point in life. And so the over-diagnosis is something, or how being quick to label is something that we're also seeing being something that's problematic in schools right now when it comes to mental health. It's a really good point. Thank you. Any other points? Any other confirming ones? I've got the third one. What did you find confirming? Something that just, you thought, my gosh, yes, it's exactly what we're seeing, what we're experiencing. Any points of confirmation in what we just shared? Just all of the above? What's yours, Michelle? That everyone's a winner thing, the over-praising perhaps. Okay, yeah, interesting. All right, in the few minutes we've got left, I want to look at some strategy stuff. Regardless of whether you're from industry or in the education space, how do you bridge these gaps? Bear in mind some of the changes we've talked about. And I'm going to look at 3 strategies very briefly, and we'll come back and look at that 7th statement to finish our time together. And the first key, if you're going to bridge this gap and engage this next generation who've been raised in a very different world, who've got a very different mentality, the first key is this: you've got to prioritise a relationship. For this group, relationship is the most important thing. And if we have time, I'd love to share some stories of where schools have overhauled the whole approach to teacher-student relationships, and the differences have been profound. It's been cool to see some of them play out over a number of years now. But it's interesting, this whole importance of relationship is so key for this group. It's always been important, but it's more important now than ever before. A colleague of mine based in Perth, a guy named Dr. Ian Lillico, who's got some great stuff on boys' education. He puts it well, he says, today's students learn teachers, not subjects. Until your students have learned you, until there's a sense of connection with you as the teacher, they'll be resistant or reluctant to what it is you're trying to teach them. Last year, probably one of the highlights for me career-wise, and Guy mentioned it before, was getting the chance to speak at a conference in America with John Maxwell. And I don't know if you're familiar with John Maxwell, probably one of the leading thinkers when it comes to leadership and management, peak performance in human beings. But it was interesting chatting with him backstage at this conference, a very humble, down-to-earth sort of guy. And one of John Maxwell's most famous quotes really stood out because I think it typifies the mentality of so many younger generations. And one of his most famous quotes is this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is especially true with this generation. Now, if we had time, we could spend a lot more time talking about how to do this. How do you build a strong, appropriate relationship? Because, as we said before, this is not about being popular. You often see teachers who equate popularity with engagement. If they think I'm cool, I've won. Not necessarily. In fact, sometimes the teachers who are not necessarily the cool teachers are the ones who've got the most solid relationship with students. And we can look at a whole lot of strategies around how you build relationships. One of the most important keys is authenticity. You've got to be real with this group. They have a finely tuned BS meter. You know what that is? First word's bull, you can connect the dots, okay? But it's true. The first hint of inconsistency, hypocrisy, double standards, they'll sniff it a mile off, and the shutters come crashing straight down. It also means for this group, don't just be authentic, be interested. Take a deliberate, strategic interest in them outside the school or the learning environment. What's happening in their lives more broadly. And bear in mind that as you take an interest in students, it will likely be reciprocated. They want to know about you and your family and your hobbies and the music you listen to. And this can be confronting, particularly when they send you a Facebook invitation to be a friend. You've got to navigate that so carefully, but you've also got to let the guard down and allow them to take an interest in you, because for this group, that is the currency of trust. Okay, so the importance of relationship is number one. Number two, if you want to engage this group, use stories to teach and coach. And we talked before about the fact this is a generation who are postmodern in their worldview. The best way to teach a postmodern generation is through narrative. It's nothing sexy, it's nothing new, but it's always worked, and it works more now than ever before. Because the mantra of a postmodern learner is this: don't tell me it's right, don't tell me what you're trying to teach me is right, show me it works. Take that lesson, that principle, that truth, apply it to your experience. Tell me a story of how you've lived that out. And that's when the penny drops in this group. And so my encouragement to you, if you're an educator, is you can no longer simply be the messenger of content. You and your stories, that's a central part of the message with this group. And I also encourage you, those of you who are parents, make sure you're passing your stories on to your kids. Now, of course, this doesn't mean you all sit down and start the whole "when I was your age" routine, okay? This just means as you, some of you are like, really? No, don't do that. Okay, but as you go through life, seed in your experiences and stories. By the way, not just the good stories, but the bad ones. Share the stuff-ups with your kids, the embarrassing moments. Now, some of them they'll come back and throw in your face at inopportune times, and that's just the risk you run. But the reality is, it makes you real, it makes you relatable. And for this group, a well-told story is far better than a well-worded sermon. They'll resist what you think they should do, okay, but they'll learn from your own journey, what you've experienced. Your stories are the most effective way to get a message or a truth through to this group. Number three, we are moving quickly here. Number three, third key is respond well to the why question. Can I suggest smart leaders, whether they're leaders in the corporate or industry, or world of industry or corporate or in the classroom, smart leaders begin to realise the question of why from younger generations can be a gift. The chief reason for this is this is a generation who are coming into the world, coming into the classroom, coming into the workplace with fresh eyes. The beauty of people with fresh eyes is they don't know how stuff's always been done. You know, one of the central pillars of this conference is around the importance of innovation. And one of the most important questions for innovation is why? Why do we do it that way? Why do we do it at all? And this group will ask that question more effectively than any other group, partly because of the fresh eyes they've got. I love the quote here from the late Dr. Wayne Dyer. He said, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And the beauty of this younger generation is they come into your classroom, they come into the workplace with a different perspective, so they therefore see things differently. And people with fresh eyes, what will often happen is they will see really simple solutions to problems the experts have made really complicated. Have you had that experience where you're working on a project, trying to solve a problem, you just can't see the way forward? And someone walks in from outside the situation and says, well, what about this? Have you considered that? And you go, gosh, that was so obvious, but I couldn't see it. I was too close. I love the students' exam response. It's a case in point of seeing a simple solution to an otherwise complicated problem. Now, teachers say this is called smart ass, okay? It's not called fresh eyes, okay? But it sort of makes that point. And I reckon the best example I've come across of the power of fresh eyes from young people in asking the why question, bringing about innovation, is actually came from an example in the military a few years ago. I was reading a case where a group of young recruits were doing their basic training in the army. And they got to a point in their training where they were being taught how to use artillery guns. And the instructing officer was going through step by step how to use an artillery gun. And he got to one point in the lesson, the standard lesson format. He said, okay, when you load a round into an artillery gun, you need to count 8 seconds when you load the round to when you fire it. Not 7 seconds, not 9, it's got to be 8. And one of the young millennial Gen Y recruits, this is something this group always do, put up his hand. Not really encouraged in a military environment. He's like, sir, why? What's the deal with the 8 seconds? You can imagine how well this went down. And the officer gave some non-response, moved on with the lesson, saw it as a bit disrespectful. But the question stuck with him. And a few days later, this officer was speaking to another officer, a colleague of his, and says, do you know why we wait 8 seconds with the guns? One of the young grunts asked the other day, and actually didn't know. And this colleague of his says, oh, I don't know either, let's check it out. So they went through a whole lot of historical records, and here's what they discovered. They traced it back to the mid-1800s. The reason for the 8-second rule was this: we used to use horses to drag artillery guns to the front line. And they had discovered in the mid-1800s, the innovative bunch they were at the time, that on average it took about 8 seconds to move the horses far enough back away from the guns, so that when you fired the gun, the horse wouldn't get freaked out by the noise. Now, we haven't used horses to do this for just a few decades now, but the rule had stuck. Even though it made no sense, it served no purpose, and you might think that's crazy, but is it possible? You think about your own environment. The school you teach in, the industry or corporate you work in, is it possible you've got something to do the same? There are systems, processes, ways of doing things that you've done it for this many years, but you actually haven't stopped and ever asked yourself why. You just do it out of habit. And the beauty of people with fresh eyes, particularly this young group, asking why can be a phenomenal source of innovation. All right, we are almost out of time. What I want to do before we finish up, I'll put my details up on the screen. Feel free to check out the website, a whole pile of things that might be useful up there. There's a whole video channel on our website with short video clips that build on some of the things we've talked about, if that would be helpful. I'm also through a couple of books in case they would be of use. I'm going to chuck them on a table down here where the coffee is when we're done here while you're getting dessert, if they will be useful. So it's a couple of copies of this one. Most of the book, more than half, is the strategy stuff. You know, teaching and learning, behaviour management, leading this group in a workplace setting. And there's also a chapter on each of the different generations to understand how we each tick. So there's some copies of that if that would be useful. The other thing, in case it would be of help, you know, we're talking about the importance of passing on stories in the family unit, you know, parent to child, grandparent to grandchild. But a few years ago we did some research, and nationally we're asking how many parents have written their stories down to pass on to their kids. And we found around Australia the number was 4%. That was it. Any of you that have lost a parent or a grandparent recently, you know the reason why the writing down thing is so important? Because you know the moment they're gone, and you think, gosh, I wish I could ask about that. And it's often too late at that point. So a number of years ago, we put this book together. It's basically a guided journal designed to, I guess, prompt you or give you a bit of a structure to write your stories, your memories, your experiences down and capture them on paper, so you've got something to hand on to the next generation. So it's a whole, I think it's about 200 questions in here with a whole lot of blank lines to be able to guide you through the process of reflecting on your stories, your memories, your experiences, to get that stuff on paper to be able to pass on. So there's a few of those at the back if they will be of use as well. The other thing, in case it would be helpful, particularly those of you who are in leadership roles, a couple of months back we put together a short clip, I think it's about 6 minutes long, a short clip looking at strategies for leading and managing millennials. It's a few of the things we've touched about, but it's a lot more detail than we went into tonight. If that would be helpful, best way, I was going to send you a link to this video in case that would be useful to have, to even pass around to other colleagues. Best way to do it, if you jump, maybe grab out your phone now or do this later, if you go onto my website, there's a little blue button there that says conference code. So you click on that button, so the website's myname.net, little blue button, just put in your first name, the best email address for us to send the link to download that video to, and just the code is NAAE. So if you do that, probably we'll keep it open until maybe up tomorrow lunchtime or something, and then I'll send that email out on Friday or Thursday. So feel free to check that out if that would be helpful. Just conference code, first name, email address, and that code, and then we'll send you the link for that video that you can then share around if that would be useful. Just as we draw all this together though, I promised you that I'd finish with the 7th statement, the 7th sentence. So I want to just put a bow on what we've talked about by covering that off. And I think this is one that I imagine most of you have seen or experienced. And it's a statement or a sentence that goes like this. It's pretty common amongst this group. This mentality that, I've got this. I'm sorted. I've got it all figured out. Don't need you. Don't need anyone else. There's often this sense of, I don't know if you see this as well, there's this hard exterior. Often in this group it can present itself as arrogance, self-assuredness. The reality, of course, is often arrogance is a mask for insecurity, and yet we see that so often in young people. And having worked with so many of this group over so many years, my simple encouragement is this. Beyond that confident facade, that I've got this figured out, I don't need you. Beyond that, this is a generation who are desperately craving leadership. They're craving boundaries. As we said, it's how you put the boundaries in place, that's what matters. And you know what they're looking for above all else? mentoring, connection with adults. The reality is, and having worked a whole lot around Tassie, and I know not everyone's from Tassie, but specific to Tassie, one of the big challenges we found from a family perspective is absent dads. It's a significant issue in some regional areas around Tasmania, probably more so than other areas in Australia. And it's not just dads who are absent, it's parents who are busy. And the challenge is if you've got a generation of young people, upwards of 58% of them, by the way, aren't growing up in the presence of their biological father. And it's not just dads, but parents who are busy. If they're not getting that leadership, that boundaries, that mentoring from their parents, they come into school. And if they don't get it from you, you know where they'll take it from? They'll take it from their peers. They'll take it from pop culture. And my simple encouragement is this: beyond all the teaching and learning outcomes, beyond all the engagement stuff, just your simple role as an adult figure in the lives of this group is so important. They might say, I've got this, but they haven't. They are looking for mentoring. So I hope that has been useful tonight. Thank you again for the invitation to be here. And I hope that's helpful in just thinking about how you bridge some of these gaps. It's so critical you do. So thanks again. Cheers.